I feel very happy to be sharing on the theme of forgiveness as I celebrate my birthday because I have been forgiven by Jesus and I have life and have it more abundantly. And that is why I can really celebrate my birthday. There are persons who have reached my own age I retire in 2 years' time. And so there are persons who have reached my own age, and some of them are not very happy, you know. But my relationship with the Lord has just been so sweet. I have reason to celebrate my life, and in so doing, I'm actually celebrating Him, the abundant life that He has given to me. All right, now I I want to look at forgiveness in relation to forgiving God. Yes, Reverend Luke Simpson, he spoke a lot about forgiving others, persons who have wronged us. And I have had the experience, many years ago, quite some years ago, of having faced the challenge of forgiving God because He was the one. I felt that He hurt me. Yes. And it's a testimony I've shared recently on the prayer line, with Passion and Purity Group on Saturday and so on. And even this morning, as at work, the UCCF, we meet at 6:30 a.m. in my office for prayer. And it was more than just prayer. They really celebrated me and made me feel very special. And I also shared some of what I'm going to share with you now with them. Right. And so I realized that at the age of in my early 20s, that I actually had up God. Yeah, man. Big time I had him up. And he had allowed me to go through a major bout of illness. Honest, for me, it was a wicked thing. It was a very wicked thing. And I thought to myself, if the Lord wanted to help me to grow and to help me to learn more about Him and to learn whatever, my Lord, He could have chosen another way. He's a creative God, isn't He? And I was upset with Him. And Reverend Luke Simpson, he spoke about, what is it now? Recognizing the hurt. I sat with my therapist and I'm going through this thing, and she was a Christian counselor herself. And she's listening to me talk through my pain, processing the pain, as Reverend Luke Simpson spoke to. And she said to me, Faith, you have up God. So me never did realize it. I never realized it, but the lady she hit the nail on the head. Yes, man. Me did have him up big time. And in processing the pain, as Reverend Simpson alluded to, I did a lot of journaling, and I told God some hard words, but the Lord is just so sweet, I don't know why I've never strike me down, but He really loves me, and he welcomed me speaking the truth in my heart, and I quarreled with Him. And I actually said to Him, I wrote it in my journal. I said to Him, I hate you. Me tell God so. And Him never strike me, Lord, I believe He listened to me and He heard my hurt and my pain. And so I had Him up for that. And I told Him some other things, Yeah, man. I told Him some other things. And I went back through my past. And I remember I said to Him, where were you? Where were you, God? Tell me, where were you when I was suffering XYZ, XYZ, XYZ? Where were you? Uh-huh. And I had a problem with God. And then now, in addition to my own suffering, I saw the suffering of others. From I was a little bit, I am seeing the suffering of others. There was this young girl in my life, and she apparently had a mental illness. I don't know that I'd call it that at the time, but it was obvious that something was wrong with her. And her parents, apparently were in denial. I can call it denial now. And so, to my mind, she didn't get the kind of help that she needed to, and she was a spectacle. When she was in high school, the students would gather around her because she's telling them her personal business. And I was at school at the time with her in a higher form. I was in sixth form, and I would be chasing away the students who gathered around her to hear her shame. You know, and I would remember this scripture where I think it was a blind man. Somebody was blind, and the disciples must have asked Jesus, "Who sinned? Why is this man blind?" And Jesus said, "No, nobody sinned. It was for His glory, for His God, Jesus' glory." And I look into that, and I said, "But that not sound right at all." And I accuse God of some things. My God is just sweet. He just forgive me like that. I thought that God was a sadist. Aha. Taking pleasure out of people's suffering. You allow the man to suffer as a blind man so that you can get the glory. That never sound right to me. That never looked right. Nothing about it was right, if you ask me. And so I had a problem with God. And yeah, from I was little bit, I'm seeing people suffering, and I'm not understanding how God of love would allow, because some of that suffering that I saw, you know, the person didn't bring it on themselves. If somebody is born with a mental challenge, for example, like that young lady in my life, was younger than me when I was in high school, and she would just be out of control and so on, and suffering so much shame, as far as I'm concerned. That wasn't her doing, was it? And I felt like God had made her like that. And so I had reason to have up God. Now, when I myself had suffered that major affliction, I had to go get help. Of course, I was seeing a therapist. She was the one who said, "Faith, you have up God." And then I got into the journaling, and I just reload the thing, as I processed the pain. Uh, Journaling and so on. So we're talking about how did I get help with this business of having up God. Uh-huh. With this business of feeling unforgiveness towards God. Right. So I sought professional help from a therapist. I had support from ministers in my church. And of course, I did my journaling, as I mentioned before, the business of processing the pain. And I saw God's provision, His grace, while I tried to find healing myself. I have an awesome family that really provided all I needed to find healing, and healing, it was costly. Money, whole heap of money, and I did not have to find any of that for myself, although I was a working woman. I saw God's grace and God's love extended to me even while I was in the place of sorting out whether or not He really loved me. to have allowed me to be going through what I was going through. I remember when I went back to church now. When I went back to church, having been away from work and church and so on for at least 6 weeks, and I went back to church, one of the ministers at church, she said to me, "It's for a higher purpose. It's for a higher purpose." Me no know what she talk about. It's for a higher purpose. What I went through for a higher which purpose? I could not see the higher purpose. Another minister said to me, I remember I got sick after I had been singing this song, Brooklyn Tabernacle song. It got under my skin because, listen, you see, anything I do, by God's grace, I do it with all my might. Yes. And so, the song, "Consume me, Lord, with the fire of your spirit. Consume me, Lord. Make me more like thee. Break me, Lord, and bless the broken pieces of my life. Let me be used, Lord, by thee." And one of the verses says, a two verse, but I'm going to tell you the second one. "Love consumed you for its glory, and nailed you to a rugged tree. And there you wrote redemption story with the blood you shed for me. And here you know. And should it be that you would ask no less of me, Lord, help me pay the cost. For only if I lose myself in thee will I ever hope to win the lost." And I sing that song there from the bottom of my heart. You know what I mean? It mean it. Me mean it, me mean it, me mean it. But even didn't know, say, what might have happened afterwards, perhaps I would have thought twice about singing it. And so when I went back to church, one of the ministers, she says to me, "You see, Faith, when you ask the Lord to consume you," and that's what she starts to speak nice, "You see, Faith, when you ask the Lord to consume you with the fire of his spirit, he does just that." And so I'm getting all of these words, and time is passing. Time is passing, time is passing. And, as far as I was concerned, it was because I wanted so much of God that I was afflicted in the way I was afflicted. So I have to blame him. I have to blame him, and I have to tell him a piece of my mind. And he desires truth in the inward parts. Actually, he never really had a problem with it, because he really wants us to come bare and naked. Reverend Simpson spoke about recognizing the hurt. Yeah. And I hit the hurt head on. With the passage of time, fast forward, Reverend Simpson also talked about, what's his name now? Shifting the perspective. I was able to shift the perspective ultimately and to reframe the experience. I saw the dots connected. So the Lord had allowed me to go through that particular kind of illness. I saw it. I finally understood it. I finally understood the business of what was a higher purpose, because that shaped my career path. I've taught. I'm a trained teacher in foreign languages. I taught Spanish for 19 years at Arden High School. And how I taught with much compassion. For having had to go through therapy, I understood myself better, and in so doing, I understood people better, and I understood people's pain and suffering better. And so the way I taught Spanish, I always said I taught via the vehicle of love. because I thought I was unloved, growing up, which was a huge lie the enemy had told me. And I even thought that God didn't love me for having afflicted me the way, caused me to be afflicted in the way I was. So there was a lot of stuff happening inside of me that needed to be healed. But nobody would have known that something was wrong with Faith. Why? I functioned at a very high level. Usually, we find out that something may be wrong with a student due to bad behavior or poor academic performance. I performed at a very high standard academically. I was a good girl. Yes, in upper sixth, I was one of the two deputy head girls, for example, at Arden High School. I did, by God's grace, I did everything with excellence. I have always been a very talented young lady. Yeah, drama, singing, I'm good at making people laugh, and I love to laugh myself. And none of that was pretense. None of that was pretense. That was just me. Just so. Now, whoever recognized that inside of me I was carrying deep pain? Nobody. But because of the plan that God had for my life, He needed to bring me to a place. This is what I understood. Afterwards, afterwards, He needed to have brought me to a place to find healing for myself, because me going to turn teacher and me going to turn counselor. So having taught Spanish for 19 years, I ultimately, afterwards, I served as counselor at the tertiary level. I'm into my 22nd year now as a counselor. So the Lord had to fix me. And so He allowed me to go through that kind of hurt, which brought so much shame, so that I could be positioned for the career path that He had for me. In addition, so that I could be positioned for the ministry that He had for me. For me, my job is my ministry and my ministry is my job. Me don't know the difference. If you ever see the kind of tributes I've had from students, and not just students from way back when I started in the field of education from 1984 until now, and I carry, I have, relationships, and you must see the kind of tributes I'm getting from them, and not only from them, person I've worked with in all the areas, my colleagues, my, people generally. And I have been able to give of myself to others because there was purpose in my pain. We're talking about me forgiving God. So with all of that, I have to let it go. I have to let Him go, because I saw clearly that He knew what He was doing in me. And so today, I am very satisfied and happy with my life. I love my job. I love people. People love me. I saw it. I've seen it, that it's for a higher purpose indeed. My relationships have been enhanced. Generally speaking, Reverend Simpson spoke about how, forgiveness can impact our relationships in a positive way. And of course, my love for God has deepened like wow. So I'm at a place now of absolute surrender to the Lord, because He took me through a journey of deep pain where I, was unforgiving towards Him. But the experience has been reframed for me, because I see that there was purpose in it all. And so forgiveness, Forgiving God uh, is very crucial to the quality of life we lead and the level of joy we experience. I believe that a lot of us, if not most of us, if not all of us, have had an experience where we feel disappointed, that God has disappointed us, for he has allowed some things to happen. And as I share with you here as counselors, I believe counselors are on the line and other persons as well of other careers, whatever, teachers, I don't know, friends might have been invited and so on. And I am saying to you today that the hurt that you feel that you might think that God might have caused, or maybe he really doesn't love you, maybe he really hates you, um, it's really for a higher purpose. And so you can release God as I have, because I see that it was really meant for good. Yes, all things work together for good. Reverend Simpson, he brought that out. All things work together. It worked for my good, man. May I tell you, no, say it worked for my good, like, whoa. And it not only worked for my good, but it has worked for the good of many others and many other people, persons that the Lord has allowed me to influence for his glory. Yes. So I've forgiven God and I'm on a different path now. So when the other pain and challenges come, you know, I can say it's really for a higher purpose. And I just release God and I say, God, do what you want to do in me. Thank you so much for listening. I trust that you were blessed once again, as I know you have been blessed by the first speaker. Praise God.